Hello everyone, welcome to episode 22 of Last Minute FPL. This is the Gameweek 22 podcast. This will be a solo podcast. Vikas is unfortunately red flagged. So let's dive right into it. We'll start with last week's points. This time I finished on top with 76 points. For once the AI team isn't first. Overall rank up to 669k, up from 780k. It was a good week overall. Relatively happy with the Palmer captaincy, even though Isak got more points. I think there was enough of a doubt that he wouldn't play that made me doubt it and go with Palmer. I got really lucky with the Semenyo haul. He got a goal and an assist against Chelsea, and I was quite sure I was benching him. But then there was some doubt about whether Joao Pedro would play. And that doubt was enough for me to start Semenyo. So even though Pedro started, I gained that 11 points. Happy with Rogers getting 6 points and Lewis Hall getting a clean sheet as soon as I brought him in. And finally Henderson as well, keeping a clean sheet and getting some bonus as well. Really disappointed with Bruno. He got just 4 points, even though he ended up getting 2 bonus. He did nothing, but he got 2 bonus. Ahmad owners were the real winners with his late hat-trick. And in typical FPL fashion, Solanke getting an own goal, 0 points. For a few brief moments there, I thought Gabriel had scored. So that +6 somehow became a -2 because he didn't even get the assist for Solanke's own goal. But overall, quite happy with this week. On 669, 699, apparently that's my rank now. But yeah, green arrows are always welcome. Moving on to Vikas's team, 65 points. He's very disappointed with how the captaincy turned out. I think otherwise it was a great week overall. If we start with the positives, that cheap defense, getting 6, 6 and 7 points, all 3 defenders keeping... actually, Robinson got 2 assists and Munoz and Hall got clean sheets. Last week, I felt that his defense was... I was jealous to see that defense. And if you look at how the premium players did, like Saliba, Trent and Gabriel, all blanking, I think saving money in defense was definitely the right move for him. Unfortunately, Haaland blanking and Isak and Palmer doing well meant that his week was stuck on 65 points. Otherwise, it could have been a really, really good week with 80 plus points. So his overall rank kind of stagnated around 2.8 million. But I think soon he'll have that Haaland money freed up to move it into other players. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. And then for the first time in a long time, the AI team finished the bottom of our league with 63 points. I have to take some of the blame here. Kind of sabotaged the team by mistake. So the Joao Pedro news broke on the morning of the deadline, and it seemed obvious that he wouldn't play. I made the change for my team. I put Pedro on the bench and played Semenyo, and I got the 11 points. But for the AI team, I forgot to make the move, and Wood was stuck with his 9 points on the bench. But in the end, Pedro did start, so maybe it wasn't the worst decision, but definitely the 8 points loss affecting it. A red arrow going down from 2.1k to 3.9k, but still in a very, very, very healthy position, just over the halfway point, and AI team is comfortably in the top 10k and like more than 100 points ahead of both of us. Let's take a quick look at the mini league standings now to see what changed. And there is a big change at the top. The AI team getting just 63 points meant that Conte really caught up. 96 points, what an amazing week. Conte captained Salah, I believe, but the team had Foden, it had a lot of high point scorers, which meant that more than 30 points were gained, and now the gap at the top is less than 30, which I think can be made up in 1 or 2 really good game weeks. So interesting to see that the title race is back on. we have to scroll a lot to find mine and Vikas's teams this time. I'm somewhere mid-table on 17th with 13, 15 points. But if you look at it, 20 points above me is already in the top 10. So I'm not too bothered about where I am. Whereas Vikas's team is still in the third last position with the 2.8 million rank, quite comfortably ahead of the bottom two. So there's only one way, and he'll probably gain some positions soon. Cool. Now let's go back to the previous game weeks and look at what happened in the matches last week. I'll start with the United game, a happy game for once. I caught the highlights, and Ahmad was simply excellent. He has this knack of finding ways to score, not necessarily with the most perfect shots, but like for example, the goal he scored against City, he didn't hit the ball cleanly, but he somehow got the ball in the back of the net. And today's first goal was very similar, showing a lot of perseverance, persistence, getting the ball on the rebound and scoring. And then his second goal was very well taken. Great ball from Eriksen as well. And then the third goal, I think he's making it a habit to dispossess defenders or goalkeepers and scoring the simple goals. Bruno was a disappointment. He did have a couple of half chances, but nothing much to speak of it. Ahmad was by far and away the best player. And United's defense continues to disappoint. They gave up a lot of chances, and they could have easily been 2-0 down if it wasn't for some good saves from Onana. So yeah, I think at Ahmad's price point, he does seem like a really good option. United still has some decent fixtures coming up. Maybe in the fifth midfielder spot where Morgan Rogers plays, that could be a good transfer to make if you have the funds. I mean, you should have the funds because he's so cheap. The other game that I caught was the Arsenal Spurs game. And yeah, I think once again, Spurs were pretty poor defensively. They gave up a lot of chances to Arsenal, but they definitely threatened an attack. Arsenal's defense didn't look as solid as it usually does. And I think there were a couple of last-ditch tackles made by Gabriel. Otherwise, Spurs could have easily had more than one goal. And once Arsenal went 2-1 up, I think it was just one-way traffic. Spurs had the odd chance, but towards the end, Arsenal should have put the game to bed because they were running the risk of a Spurs equalizer at any moment. But yeah, the game finished 2-1. I think fair result. And now Arsenal have put together a string of good results, and they might even be challenging for the title again. Because Forest, once again with a great performance, holding Liverpool at home. I think this was an interesting game. I think Forest managed to keep Salah quiet for the longest time. But then Liverpool always have this stretch of 10 to 15 minutes where they suddenly turn it on. And that's what happened in this game. Once Jota came, and I think he scored within 20 seconds of coming on. I think it's the fastest substitute goal for a Liverpool player in Premier League history. And what that meant was Liverpool were back in it, and they started creating chance after chance. And Salah got his chances as well, but he didn't take them. Sels did well, except for the goal. Sels probably should have come out and caught the ball, but great result for Forest nevertheless. And Chris Wood keeps scoring 9 points again, and I mean, the man's a machine this season, and I mean, it's a good time to bring him in. The fixtures are turning good for Forest again, and I think that there's no reason to not bring him. He's probably having the season of his life, and it's definitely not a questionable decision to bring him in. Moving on, I also want to talk about the Man City game, Brentford 2, Man City 2. Foden was amazing, and not just the goals, he played really well. And this was something we recommended in the podcast last week as well. He showed pretty highly in the AI projections as well as the stats tables, and he duly rewarded his owners with 2 goals. I think now is probably not the time to bring him in, because after the Ipswich game next week, the tougher fixtures start for Man City. So it doesn't really make sense to use a transfer on a player like Foden with double game weeks coming up and blank game weeks coming up. It probably makes sense to focus your transfers elsewhere. But unfortunately for City, they couldn't keep that 2-0 lead. And in the last 10 minutes, they gave up a lot of chances and eventually it finished 2-2. Yeah, it's a strange season and it's something that we weren't expecting at all from City or Pep. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go from here because the title clearly seems to be out of reach. And top four is probably the best they can do. It remains to be seen how much motivation they have to, keep getting the goals like they used to in previous seasons. And finally, I do want to touch upon the Chelsea-Bournemouth game. Jackson hit the post early on, and like if you look at his XGI, he had almost 1.5 expected goal involvement. The star of the show was definitely Semenyo though, and as an owner, really happy to see that he got 2 returns. He won the penalty which Kluivert scored, and he also scored a wonder goal. The kind of goal that you're cursing if you're not an owner because it happens once. It's a very low XG chance. But yeah, I think at that price point, for example, Sarr got an assist this week for Palace. Eze got an assist. There were a lot of cheaper midfielders who finally rewarded their owners after a series of blanks. So I think it was a pretty high scoring week overall. Cool. Let's look at next week's fixtures now. Some interesting games. I think one thing that I've realized is as soon as you look at any fixtures for a game week, the first game to target is whoever is playing Southampton because they look dreadful and they're very low on confidence. United did their utmost best to give them some charity points, but Southampton are so bad that they couldn't hold on against even United. And they do play Nottingham Forest away next, which is not at all an easy fixture given Forest's form. I think before the Liverpool game, they were on a run of 7 wins in a row. And yeah, I think if you own Chris Wood or Sells or any of the Forest defenders, you'll definitely be, at the very least, expecting a single return, if not more. The other game that is of interest is Brentford versus Liverpool. Brentford have been really attacking at home. They've done well, but also their attacking style means that they give up a lot of chances, and that could play into Liverpool's hands. But it's a week where you maybe can say that it's not a no-brainer to captain Salah, just like last week, although for different reasons. Because if you look at the other fixtures, Chelsea is playing Wolves at home, and that could be a super high scoreline. Palmer already proved that, he in the last 4 game weeks, I think he outscored Salah thrice. It's just that the other game, Salah scored more than 20 points against West Ham, or almost 20 points. But yeah, I think against Wolves, it could be another super high-scoring game because in the reverse fixture, if you remember, Chelsea scored 5 or 6 goals against them, and that was the game which really put Palmer on the roadmap this season because a lot of people didn't own Palmer at that time. But he got, I think, 3 goals and 1 assist or something, and it really elevated him to the same levels as Salah and Haaland, if not more. So personally, I do have my captaincy on Palmer this week as it stands. I am considering Salah, but I'll likely keep it on Palmer. The other game that's interesting is Newcastle versus Bournemouth. Newcastle are quickly rising to be one of the top teams in the league this season. Their form has been really good, and Isak is now in the running for Golden Boot. He did start the season slow, but he's been scoring week after week, and I don't think that will be a really tough game for them because even defensively, Newcastle have been very solid. Keeping a lot of clean sheets, not giving up too many chances, and they seem to have found a rhythm and a starting 11 that is quite stable this season. And if you're a Hall owner or if you have Gordon or Isak, I think that the next 3 fixtures also still look really good for them. And finally, I want to talk about the Ipswich Man City game. This could probably be the last game week that Haaland owners will keep him, even the ones who've kept faith with him up until now. Because after this, the fixtures do turn and they become more tricky, and it may not be justifiable to keep him at his price. But this could be one last hurrah. Yeah, I think Ipswich has been a team alongside Leicester and Wolves and Southampton and West Ham that FPL managers have liked to target with the captaincy. And like, what better chance for Haaland to come back and he did. I mean, he did look good against West Ham with his brace. Unfortunate that he blanked against Brentford, but you can't go wrong with a Man City at forward captain against Ipswich. So yeah, I think that if I had Haaland and if I was chasing someone in the mini league, that would be my play. Okay, we'll now look at this interesting analysis put together by Rob T FPL regarding the assistant manager chip. So we're currently heading into game week 22, and the assistant manager chip becomes available from game week 24, which is not too far away. And also, interestingly, game week 24 is provisionally a double game week. So Liverpool plays the Liverpool-Everton game, which got postponed from earlier in the season, is going to be taking place in game week 24. What this means is Liverpool will play twice and Everton will play twice. So you want to own as many of their players as possible. But with this new assistant manager chip, what it also means is that you might want to bring in someone like a slot. And this analysis that we have here is a look at the last 8 seasons, starting from 2016-17 till 2024. It looks at all the game week 24 to 38 games, and it identifies which set of 3 fixtures actually would have fetched the most assistant manager points. So what you're seeing here is, in last season's game week 34, if you had brought in Crystal Palace's manager as the assistant manager for that period, for game week 34, then you would have got 41 points in those 3 game weeks. So if you remember, assistant managers score points when the team either wins, draws, or scores goals. And you get bonus points if you're playing against a team that's 5 or more places above you in the Premier League table. So what Rob actually did is he looked at in fact, you're seeing a view of the top 25, but he put together the top 100 points scored in the last 8 seasons. Do give him a follow on X. And so what he found from this set of results is, and I'll go to the next view, there are 2 types of games that are most likely to get good scores for the assistant manager chip. One is the non-table bonus games, where a team is an overwhelming favorite against another team. So what you're seeing here is 4 columns where the pre-match market odds of winning start at 40%, go all the way up to 70+%. And what he found is, if the pre-match odds are more than 70%, then the mean points scored was 8.7 for a single game week. And on the right, you'll see that these are the table bonus games. So if you're playing a team that's more than 5 spots above you in the league, and you have a 30+% chance of winning according to the market odds, then the mean points scored is 10.4. So these are the 2 cases that Rob is recommending as most likely to get high points. So one is if the team is an overwhelming favorite, more than 70% chance of winning, or if the team is if the team is playing against someone 5 or more spots above it and has a 30+% chance of winning. One key difference between the 2 is that even though the mean points scored by the table bonus games is higher, there is also a very high chance of that busting. So your floor for your non-table bonus games is high, so it's more reliable because your team is 70% likely to win. But in the table bonus game, it's like you're rolling a die. Your reward is higher, but your risk is also higher. There is a very high probability that you may not get any points out of it at all. So depending on where you are in your overall rank and where you are in your mini league, you could play this game of risk reward. I think that because you can also transfer between managers within game weeks, you can always change your strategy. Maybe you can start with a team like Fulham. Let's say they're playing Forest. Forest is currently third in the league, and I think Fulham is eighth. So Fulham would be eligible for the bonus if they're playing against Forest. So definitely it's worth a risk if you're someone who's trying to chase, because the reward is very high. And let's say you don't get it and then you want to play it safe again, then you can go for someone like a Liverpool manager or an Arsenal manager. Cool. Now let's look at our team stats view that we typically look at each week. So this is the team attacking data for the season. And if we review it from last week, there aren't too many changes. Although Man City do climb back into the top four and Tottenham continue their drop in the attacking data. One thing that's clear is Liverpool are head and shoulders above every other team in the league. They top the attacking data, they top the defensive data, and they're getting more than 16 shots a game. Same as Chelsea, but Chelsea's defensive data is not at all similar to Liverpool. So in terms of attack, I would say, especially with the double game week coming up, Liverpool will basically have 5 games in the next 4 game weeks. And it's definitely a chance to target some Liverpool players. Maybe it's worth even a risk going with someone like a Jota or a Diaz, depending on your risk appetite, because they could really go big in one game. And even if they get, let's say, 30 minutes in the other, it could be worth it. The other team that's consistently getting more than 2xg per game is Chelsea. And apart from Palmer, who pretty much everyone owns, I think Nicholas Jackson is still a very good option. He created almost 1.5 xg in the previous game. He's been very unlucky in the past 4 or 5 game weeks, missing a lot of chances that you typically expect him to take. So he's a player I think people should still consider. And interestingly, Bournemouth is still third. And as a Semenyo owner, that's pretty heartening. Because if they're scoring, if they're creating almost 2 xg per game, then you expect him to get a lot of chances each week. The only downside is that they're scoring only around 1.5 goals per game, but the chances are coming. And if they and they're playing Newcastle away next, followed by a couple of tricky games. But at his price point, I think maybe you can even bench him and keep him. And then we come to Man City, and I think we've spoken about City. They have a really good fixture coming up, but after that, I wouldn't keep any of their players at their price points. Cool. Let's look at the defensive data now. When it comes to defensive data, again, Liverpool right at the top. And this time, instead of Chelsea with them, it's Arsenal. So Arsenal almost matching Liverpool's defensive record. But with Arsenal fixtures toughening up, I think I wouldn't recommend sticking to a double defense. I think it's time to probably just keep Gabriel. He once again showed that he has the attacking threat by almost scoring from a corner. He did get a late yellow card, which was frustrating as an owner. And then Liverpool, again, because of the double game week, it's probably time to bring their players in. So I think Trent is probably a must-have. Like he could easily go big, and they're playing Everton and Bournemouth in the double game week, and then they play Leicester soon after that. So good fixtures for Liverpool still. They're still chasing the title. And maybe if you're finding it too risky to go with someone like a Jota or a Diaz or a Darwin or a Gakpo, then maybe doubling up in defense and getting someone like a Robertson or a Van Dijk is a good option. And also remember, you can even get Arne Slot because the assistant manager chip becomes eligible in a couple of weeks. And apart from Liverpool and Arsenal, Forest still staying right up there, not giving up too many chances. They're conceding less than 1 goal a game, which is amazing to keep it up for this long in the season. And quickly rising through this table are Newcastle. So even though they started off the season pretty badly, they've really stepped it up and they've become a very stingy defense. And yeah, I think honorable mentions to even Fulham and Bournemouth, because typically you associate them with being not great defenses, but they're holding their own in the top half of this table. And I also want to call out the positions of City, United, and Spurs in this. They're sitting poorly in the bottom half of this table in the worst defenses chart. Spurs, especially, it's a pretty bad position to be in for a team like them. They conceded almost 13 shots per game, which is pretty embarrassing given the kind of money they've spent in the last few seasons. Cool. Let's now look at our game week fixtures, the ticker, and I think this is an interesting time to look at it because this is the first time we're seeing a double game week in the season. So Liverpool and Everton clearly have the best fixtures because they're 5 games in the next 4 game weeks, and it just automatically means that they're likely to get more points, at least for the Liverpool players. It's up to you how you evaluate Everton players. Personally, I do have Mykolenko on my bench, and because the double game week has 1 game against Leicester at home, I think I'll be happy to play him in game week 24. But apart from that, I don't think I would be wasting too many transfers and bringing Everton players because their attack isn't that reliable, and it's unclear how much Calvert-Lewin or NDI will play. So maybe getting someone like a Pickford can make sense because he can rack up a lot of saves. But otherwise, I'd be focusing my transfers on Liverpool players. Apart from that, Palace continue to have good fixtures. So if you still haven't brought in someone like an Eze or a Sarr, or even a Munoz in defense, I think this is still a great time to buy them. Forest, again, they're in great form, both from someone like a Chris Wood and defensively. And the next 4 fixtures are still pretty much in the blue territory. Some teams whose fixtures are turning for the worse. We spoke about Man City. So after Ipswich, they play Chelsea, Arsenal, and Newcastle. Not the best of games, and I think that after the Ipswich game is a great time to jump off them. And also Brentford. So if you miss the Mbuemo haul, I wouldn't break my team to try getting him in. He does play Liverpool next, so I would at least wait another week to make that decision. And another team I want to call out is Newcastle, because the next 3 games are Bournemouth, Southampton, and Fulham, and they're still some of the easiest fixtures around, especially from a defensive point of view. I think that someone like a Lewis Hall could do really well against these teams. Okay. Now let's jump into the position-wise analysis. We'll start with the forwards. So interesting thing this week is that Erling Haaland has dropped all the way down to 5th spot in the AI projections. I think this is the lowest I've seen him be in forwards rankings. And that's because of a couple of reasons. One is that Liverpool have a double game week. So Darwin and Gakpo, even though their game time is uncertain because of them having an extra game, their game week 24 projection is higher, which pushes them up. And it's also because Isak is in a great run of form, and I think it makes sense that he's projected above Haaland. It's interesting to see Wissa above Haaland. I think he goes under the radar a bit, especially with Mbuemo getting all the credit for Brentford's attacking returns. So I think again Haaland for the next game week still has a projected points of 5.39, so you don't need to get rid of him if you still have him. But after that, there's a steep drop off. And in terms of stats, Haaland continues to be top of the table here, although his XGI per appearance has steadily been decreasing. He started off the season well above 1, and now it's come all the way down to 0.83, and Isak is very close behind in 0.8. And he's almost half the price. So it's almost a no-brainer that Isak is the most reliable and prolific forward right now. Um, and another player who's been very frustrating to own on and off is Solanke. He continues to feature in the stats table. He has above half an XG per game. Um, but it's very unpredictable who he gets points against. I think since Spurs won 4-0 against City, they've pretty much not won a game since then. I think they beat Southampton 5-0, but every other game has either been a draw or a defeat. So very, very unpredictable. He scored against Liverpool, he scored against City, did nothing against some of the easiest teams in the Premier League. And in terms of transfers, I think I wouldn't, unless you don't have Isak, I wouldn't make a move this week for any forward. Simply because with the doubles coming up and the blanks coming up, and with the League Cup semi-finals yet to be played, it probably is a good move to save a transfer and wait it out. With especially because this season we can accumulate so many transfers. I think that information is definitely worth it. And a quick shout out to Raul Jimenez. I think there was a point a few weeks ago where it seemed like he lost his spot, and then he was coming off the bench once in a while. But he seems to have nailed down that spot, and he's once again featuring in both the AI projections and the stats tables. Okay, let's go to the midfielders now. And there is one clear outlier in the AI projections. So Mo Salah has a total EV projected of more than 31 points in the next 4 game weeks, which is by far the highest. Like the second highest is Palmer, and he's more than 10 points behind him. And look at that game week 24 projections, more than 15 points. So yeah, I think personally I'm trying to target that game week 24 for a triple captaincy for Salah. There is a small chance I may play the assistant manager chip. But given the analysis that I saw with Rob T's data, which I shared earlier, I think I'll wait to see if there is a better time to play it later in the season. Maybe sometime where there are 2 double game weeks in a set of 3 somehow. Because I still haven't decided my chip strategy about when to play the free hit or the bench boost or the wild card. So I'll probably just play the triple captain in game week 24. And I think Salah has been pretty much starting every game. He's probably not exhausted either because he's so fit now. And between the 2 games of the double game week, I think there is an FA Cup game, so that'll be a perfect time to rest him. So I think he'll definitely start both the games, and it shouldn't be a risk to play the triple captain on him. And also one interesting thing to see is that all 5 Liverpool midfielders feature in this AI projections. That's basically because of the double game week. So even Diaz, Jota, even McAllister and Szoboszlai, they all feature in this. And I think I personally wouldn't if you don't want to risk benching, I wouldn't go with Diaz and Jota. McAllister could tick away, but he's not an exciting option. Same with Szoboszlai. So I would probably go with Salah and double defense or an assistant manager chip. And a huge shout out to Gordon because he's holding his own in the 3rd spot behind Palmer and Salah. That is typically the spot which Saka was occupying before his injury. And even in terms of projected points and EV, Gordon is rated very high here. So he seems to have stepped it up a notch, and that's good to see. He's still very young, and I think he can really turn into a very reliable and established Premier League player. And looking at the stats on the right, little frustrated to see Bruno Fernandes there. I did have a rule of not bringing a United player in again, basically because Bruno Fernandes disappointed me in the first few game weeks of the season. But looks like I'm gonna have a second loop where I'm gonna be frustrated with him with a few easy fixtures. He does have a good XGI, he does have good returns as well, but yeah, I mean he's not there in the AI projections either, so it's not really all that exciting. Okay, let's move on to the defenders now. And again, it's a clean sweep of Liverpool. The entire Liverpool back four is projected to get the most points because of the double game week. And then you have the three Arsenal players, along with some cheap defenders like Hall and Robinson. I think no surprises there. The only one who's missing in the AI projections, but he's featuring very highly in the stats tables, is Munoz. His XGI is 0.23, and I think a huge haul is just around the corner somewhere. Palace do have a great run of fixtures all the way up to the blank game week. There is a strong possibility that they may blank, but I think I wouldn't hold off on bringing him in just because of that. And anyway, we'll know more once the League Cup semi-final is played. Cool. Let's look at the goalkeepers now. Not much to say here. Once again, there's not too much gap between the keepers usually. But this time there is the small, because of the double game week. Once again, Alisson and Pickford do have a little bit of a gap to the rest of the goalkeepers. I think as long as you have three Liverpool players going into the double game week and maybe one Everton player, I wouldn't necessarily make a goalkeeper transfer, especially if you have someone like a Sells who's doing the job pretty much every week. But yeah, I mean, if you're someone like me who has like a Henderson, I think it might be worth keeping aside some money to move to someone like a Pickford. All right. Let's now take a look at our next week's teams. We'll start with the AI team. The current plan is to save a transfer. Definitely the information that can come in the next few game weeks can be very useful. I think that triple Newcastle and double Forest and double Liverpool is a very good position to be in. It's definitely going for Salah captain. Last week was the first time in a long time it didn't pay off. But I think Brentford are there for the taking. Even though I'm personally going for Palmer, I don't think going for Salah is a mistake at any stretch. The other players that it has, Saliba, quiet game week for him, but Villa have been poor, and it'll be interesting to see if Arsenal go back to getting their defensive record up. Joao Pedro against United again haven't been the best defensively, and Pedro was back. He did start the game, so I think Rodgers is the player who's going to be benched. Eze against a weak West Ham defense. I think this should be a good game week for the AI, at least on paper, because I think it was a pretty big red arrow for it, going down from 2.1k to 3.9k. So maybe this is the time to come back and give a good game week. Moving on to my team, I'm also planning to save a transfer, and I'm also planning to bench Rodgers. The difference is I'll be captaining Palmer. Semenyo, I mean, this could have been the week where I transferred him out, but like I said, I would want the information of another week. I'll save a transfer, and having 2 or 3 free transfers going into the double game week can be useful, especially if I want to free up some funds to make a move for the assistant manager position. And also Semenyo's got a goal and assist last weekend, so there's also that recency bias. Pretty happy with the defense. I would have liked to have someone like a Munoz maybe with his attacking threat, but I do have some Palace defensive cover with Henderson, so hopefully he doesn't get any attacking return, and Henderson can cover the clean sheet points. Happy to have Trent anyway. The double game week is coming up. He does seem like he's not justifying his price with like the clean sheet losses and not getting too many attacking returns. But at this point, I think I have to hold him with the double game week coming up. Bruno, I mean, I made the move last week. I had a lot of options. I was looking at Eze, I was looking at Sarr, but in the end, I went with Bruno. Now I just I'll keep him for the next 3-4 game weeks at least and see how he does. the fixtures aren't terrible on paper, but with United, you just can't predict when they'll play well and when they won't. And the other player who I'm a little concerned about is Solanke. Everton have been pretty solid defensively, and Spurs have been super unpredictable. So, but at the end of the day, I mean, he has been getting around 2 returns for every 3 games, and I've pretty much held him for a long time. So I have been getting those. Sometimes I'm getting the hauls, sometimes the frustrating blanks or the own goals. But net, I think 2 out of 3 returns is a decent return for someone at his price point. The one thing that is a bit scary is Isak, not captaining Isak. Last week it definitely punished me, although I'm lucky that Palmer got 10 points and the loss was just 6. Yeah, he looks like he's on another level right now. And yeah, I think Bournemouth at home, Bournemouth have been okay defensively, but I think the way Newcastle are playing, I think they can score 3-4 goals against anyone. Small consideration I had of playing Fabianski over Henderson just because of the home game, but then West Ham have been so poor defensively, and I do want to cover Munoz's points. Yeah. Moving on to Vikas's team now. He couldn't be here today, but he did send in his team. This is likely his starting 11. He is benching Timber to play the 3 super attacking budget defenders in defense. I remember there was a few seasons ago we had the Mendy, Alonso, Robertson attacking defense. This is kind of similar with Munoz, Hall and Robinson. I think well identified like high potential point scorers for low price. And I once again, Sarr finally getting the return for him. And I think another good budget identification similar to Enzo. Isak, Pedro, Palmer, Salah, pretty much similar. But of course, I think this probably will be the swan song of Erling Haaland in his team. And he is considering switching captaincy to Palmer though, because he was quite disappointed that he didn't captain Isak last week, even though he seemed very confident that Isak was the player who was going to get most points, but he wanted to stick to his strategy of captaining Haaland, and that has kind of been the unlucky streak for him this season. But yeah, I think Timber on the bench, great first sub option with Arsenal defender. But yeah, I probably would, maybe I would play Timber over someone like Enzo. But with Wolves at home, I can see why he's choosing to play Enzo. But yeah, I think that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Bit of a new one, doing it alone and streaming it. But hope you had a good game week, and wishing you all the best for the next one.